Welcome to One Tired Teacher, episode 88, Problem Solving in the Math Classroom. So today I have a special guest, Meg Anderson from the Teacher Studio, and she is talking all about problem solving in math and what that looks like for kids and how sometimes they struggle with that typical answer of, I don't get it, and what we can do to help them move from the I don't get it to I got it. I hope you stick around.
Welcome to One Tired Teacher. And even though she may need a nap, this teacher is ready to wake up and speak her truth about the trials and treasures of teaching. Here she is, wide awake. Wait, she's not asleep right now, is she? She is awake, right? Okay. From Trina Debery Teaching and Learning, your host, Trina Debery.
Hey, so I'm back with another amazing guest. I've had such great guests for the past 5 or 6 weeks. It's been really incredible. And all of my guests have been presenters of Whole Teacher Eclecticon, which took place at on the last week of July. And it was really an amazing experience. I hope that you had a chance to experience that for yourself. It was just an unbelievable approach to the whole entire teacher. And it was just truly an amazing experience. And I think the doors are shut. And so you might have missed out. But next time, be on the lookout for that because it was really unbelievable. And Meg was another presenter that I had the privilege of working with through Whole Teacher Eclecticon, and she did an amazing session, and she has a lot of words of wisdom to share with us today, specifically in regards to problem solving. So let's get on with the show. So I'm so happy to have Meg Anderson here today from the Teacher Studio. She is a 4th grade teacher, and we are going to be talking about incorporating problem solving into the day and how to get kids really thinking and solving their own problems, which is sometimes a first. So welcome, Meg.
Thank you so much for having me today.
So Meg, all right. So tell us a little bit about you and your background with teaching.
Sure. I am super old. I have been teaching for 29 years. I actually have taught grades 2, 3, 4, and 6. I've been a looping teacher. I've taught in only 2 districts, but lots of different buildings. So I've had a pretty rich background. I have my administrative license. I have a director of instruction license, and I always thought that that's what I wanted to do, but I'm not going to lie. I have not been able to leave the kids. I love being in the trenches. I say that out loud. So, those days when it's not as fun or a little more stressful, I remind myself, you love the trenches. But yeah, it's been a long time teaching, but I know I have a lot more years in me. So that's kind of my teaching history. The way I've kind of reached the adults, because that's a passion of mine, is I've taught some graduate level classes on curriculum and instruction. I've taught a lot of workshops, and then in 2012 I started my blog, and it's been kind of my baby, and it's been a way for me to share inspiration, best practices, and so on with teachers around the world. And so that's been how I've been able to keep firmly rooted in the classroom, but also be able to reach other teachers as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's great. And that's the teacher, is that the Teacher Studio as well?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. I'll link to that in the show notes too, because I'm sure that you have a wealth of information. That's a long time, but you are not old. And I'm not very far behind you. It's been 22, 23 years. And so it's not, and I've done some looping as well. And then I thought about the administrative side. I was a student support specialist at my school with my long-term principal that I worked for almost 20 years. He wanted me to go in that direction. So I kind of was like, okay. So I was learning all this stuff. And then I'm like, he left and got promoted. And I'm like, no. So I don't want to do it with him not here. And then I actually did do that job this year, but it was just discipline. It was like all discipline and nothing else. And I was like, oh, no, 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 no. So
Yeah,
it's changing. Thank goodness. Yeah, that's not my favorite part. Like that's not a part that I enjoy. So I
no,
love making
I
connections with
agree.
kids, but yeah, but not like coming in and no. So it's not my thing. But anyway, all right. So a lot of experience. So tell me a little bit, like I definitely see that kids struggle with problem solving and knowing, like they're so used to like instant gratification is the thing that I see a lot, that they constantly want those problems solved immediately and sometimes not by themselves. So like what do you say to that?
Oh, I agree, absolutely. And we, as teachers, I think, need to acknowledge that our kids have changed. Their exposure to media and technology has changed, but that doesn't mean that we should give into that, but we do
Mhm.
need to approach those strategies differently. I think for teachers who aren't that familiar with the standards for mathematical practice, that's a great starting point. And really, the standard that says make sense of problems and persevere is possibly one of the most misunderstood standards. People
Hmm.
kind of glom onto that word persevere, and they do all sorts of great activities to teach kids to kind of stick with things, and that's fantastic and super critical. But when you really dig into that standard and realize that helping kids make sense of problems, and
Hmm.
breaking it down and look for entry points and be able to draw from a bank of strategies. I call it their toolbox. So as I introduce
Uh-huh.
new things to students and I say, okay, put this in your toolbox, you never know when you're going to need to pull it out. And so
Yeah.
by teaching those really explicitly and then gently coaching or asking that question like, well, what have we done before that might get you started on a problem today? It puts more of that ownership back on the students for
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So what kinds of strategies would you put in the toolbox for problem solving?
Oh, well, how long do we have? Let's see. Actually, um, like we were just talking about with your talking about second graders and what a critical time they are. I like to start the year with things that are more concrete. So we are using manipulatives. We're drawing pictures. I teach my students how to draw what I call math pictures. So if
Hmm.
you're drawing 4 boxes of kittens, that doesn't mean you have to have a 3-dimensional box and your kittens have to have all their whiskers. It could be a square and an X. So how
Hmm.
do we represent information from a problem using what I call, again, math pictures is one of my
Uh-huh.
very first strategies. And another one that I think teachers often overlook, we talk about it in literacy all the time, and that's visualization. So
Hmm.
when I read a problem with a student or a group of students, I ask them to close their eyes and I want them to see it acting out, because problem solving or word problems, that's the real world manifestation of why we teach math, right? And I talk about
Hmm.
this in my session quite a bit, is sometimes we have students that see math as filling out boxes in a workbook and
Hmm.
don't realize that the workbook is a way to practice the math that they need for their whole life. So I really try to tie
Hmm.
into the real world. But, if there's a problem like Trina is walking into a bakery to buy donuts, you guys, can you see that in your mind? And they're all nodding, right? And drooling. And of
Yes.
course, I
Uh-huh.
always use donuts, cookies, and pizza because I'm addicted to foods like that. So I'll say, have you ever seen those glass cases? This problem says Trina walked up to the glass case and saw that there were 6 trays. I want you to get that. And I actually talk to my kids about making a whiteboard in their brain
Uh-huh.
where they can
Uh-huh.
actually sketch it out in their brain. And for some kids, this is very natural. And for other kids, it really takes some practice.
Yes.
That problem can go any number of directions, right? I could say, now the bakery has 12 donuts on each tray. Let's take that mental picture now. Let's draw it in our notebooks. So that whole visualization, because so often, and I'm sure you've seen it, kids will read a problem and they'll say, I don't get it.
Yes.
Okay, so as a teacher, if we can get better at asking those coaching or those scaffolding questions to help them, well, what do you know? What do you see? What can you draw? Those are great concrete ways to get kids started.
Mhm. I think that's excellent. I love that. And visualization, I think, is so powerful. And it helps. I think that way, like I see in pictures. So for me, it does come natural. I know you're right. It doesn't always come natural for some kids, but I think even telling them that it doesn't have, it represents what it can represent, that picture, like the X and the circle or whatever. So they don't have to get into this elaborate drawing habit, which is sometimes what some of my littler kids would want to do. But I'm like, obviously that's going to take up a lot of time, and it also prevents people like me who can't draw at all. We can still use that. And as a teacher, you want to be able to draw because but the kids would, just laugh and they're like, oh my goodness, Miss Devery, what is that? And I'm like, I know it's supposed to be a dog, but it looks like a horse. So it's all right. We can still solve this problem. But I just love visualization because I think it is such a powerful way for them to like really think about the problem and about how they can go about solving the problem. I think that's really powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I know, like, what do you say to kids when actually, first of all, I want to say something about that visualization that you started with. Like you had that, you had that bakery with the donuts or whatever. And I used to use that when I was trying to teach my kids how to use punctuation, like how to, because they would have all these sentences without periods and capitals. And I'm like, okay, so this is what it kind of reminds me of. And I used that bakery scene. I'm like, imagine that you walked up to this bakery and the best foods are behind the glass and you see cookies and cakes. And I describe everything really in detail, the chocolate cake and this and that. And I'm like, and you're just looking at it and you're so hungry and you think this is the most beautiful bakery you've ever seen. And I'm like, and you can see everything right behind the glass. And they're all like, yeah, I got it. And I'm like, and now I go, there's a little 4-year-old who just walked up and he's really excited about the bakery and he's like leaning up on the glass and he's got his sticky fingers on the glass and he's breathing on the glass and now he's even licking the glass and they're like, ooh. And I'm like, now all that smudge and now it's smeared over the glass. I'm like, that's kind of what it looks like when we're looking at your writing. And I'm like, we know we've got beautiful ideas behind it, but when you don't punctuate and don't put periods and capitals and people don't know when to take a breath when they're reading, I'm like, they can't see it through all the smudge. And so then they're like, oh, and so it like helped them to solve their problem of not being able to remember to put periods and capitals. They would even say to each other, you've got a dirty glass. You've got dirty glass. You need to make sure you clean it so they can see your ideas. And I'm like, yes. So that's funny that you had that bakery thing because that's immediately what I thought of.
That's funny. That's an amazing example though. And we can do the same thing with math. When we start to talk about precision and accuracy and organization of your work and helping kids showcase their work and explain their thinking. And when we see how some students, are just so natural at organizing their math thinking and to be able to display those under a document camera or to share in small groups, they start to internalize that and, can strive to do that. And it's so much more powerful than if we just put a sample up on the board and say, make it look like mine. When
Yes.
students become engaged in recognizing those things.
I think that makes sense. I think organizing is probably another like strategy that we would definitely want to show the kids to help them.
Absolutely.
So, okay. So we've talked about visualizing, we've talked about organizing. Give me a few more for my listeners of things that you would automatically think of.
Sure. I think that a lot of math programs, if you teach a math series, will often introduce lessons like the make a list strategy or work backwards, things like that. And so those are things that, I just always try to make sure that as the year unfolds, I'm exposing them to that kind of problem and naming it. Rather than, it's chapter 8, lesson 4. I try to get as much of that early in the year as they can. So again, it's in their toolbox, ready for them to use. But, like anything, it takes multiple exposures and, frequent revisiting of all of those to really give them ownership of those strategies. So, but again, to start the year, and it comes back over and over again, is all those more concrete things. And some of your listeners might be familiar with the the CRA model of teaching math, where you start with a very concrete representation, then students need to be kind of coached as how to represent it in different ways, and then we can move to the abstract. So I definitely probably err on the side of making those connections concrete and representational with the strategies, and spend enough time there, because students, once they've been exposed to those things multiple times, are far more likely to make that leap to the more abstract. We call them naked numbers in my room. You know, when there's a problem where there's just nothing to ground them, you know, we want them to be able to contextualize the math they're doing. And that's where that visualization and those drawings and modeling are so critical.
Yes, I think that's great. And I also think like it's important to show kids like what to do when they struggle, like what it feels like to struggle, and like some solutions to that feeling of struggle. And sometimes I was just speaking to Claire from Vivify, which is another presenter at the conference, and she was talking about like putting these things into place where they almost fail on purpose, where like
Absolutely.
we want them to fail in these like STEM challenges, and then they take what they learned from the failure and you like reframe the challenge, and then all of a sudden whatever they learned now becomes part of what they need as their solution, which I'm like, I think that's so exciting. Like, I love that.
And I think for teachers who went through an education system where you were rewarded for the 100%, so you got the gold star for getting everything right, this is a huge paradigm shift for us too. But I mentioned it in my presentation, the work of Jo Boaler out of Stanford, you know, has her brain research is so crystal clear that we do grow our brain, we grow those synapse connections when we learn, but also when we make mistakes. And not only do we grow our brain when we make mistakes, but when we can then study the mistakes and fix the mistakes and analyze them, it's, you know, astronomical, the growth. But we can't keep that a secret from students.
Yes.
We know it as teachers, but we don't make it public to them, then we haven't done them any favors. So, you know, that creating that culture for math understanding where students can learn that math doesn't always happen fast. Math doesn't always happen perfectly. And that idea of productive struggle that Jo Boaler speaks of. In fact, just for your listeners, if they're looking for an amazing book, her book called Mathematical Mindsets is just a fantastic resource to help you better understand how the brain learns math. On her website, ucubed.org, she has links to countless videos geared just for kids that talk about these things. How some of the best math minds in the world through history and in the present didn't do well in math class. They aren't fast at their facts. And until we can shift kids' understanding of what it means to be a good math student, because we're kind of perpetuating this myth that good math students know their facts quickly, they get 100% on their assignments, they're done with their work quickly, they raise their hand a lot. We need to work to shift that so that our students recognize that, hey, mistakes grow your brain. In fact, we do an activity in my classroom called My Favorite Mistake, where I'll look through the work and I'll find some things and share what kind of mistakes were made, and we study them. And then, you know, I'll ask my students, did anyone else make this mistake? And the hands shoot up, I did, or well, I didn't make that mistake, but I made this mistake. And
I love that.
So that's a culture piece. And really,
yes, that's great. I love that. My favorite mistake. I'm totally writing that down. Yeah.
So we will often display mistakes and fixes, but that, again, from the very first day of school, that is a way to build that appreciation for what math learning is.
Yes. Ooh, I'm thinking I even want to do like my favorite mistakes, like an area in the media center where like they bring their favorite mistakes and we start talking about like, you know, how some of those mistakes became even a major fix. I mean, that's how a lot of things were invented.
Absolutely.
So I think that's really cool. All right. So that problem solving type of thinking, like how do you kind of push that into other subject areas or other areas of their life?
Right. Well, I do think that the whole growth mindset that we're kind of tangentially touching on right now applies to
Mhm.
everything we do.
Mhm.
And that idea of productive struggle and
Mhm.
being patient with yourself, and also that whole being willing to ask for help, whether it's
Yes.
from your student sitting next to you, um, creating that culture in your classroom where it's okay. In fact, it's awesome. We are all teachers of each other, so that we can capitalize on that. We often historically have taught math where the teacher does a mini lesson of some sort, maybe models solving a few problems on the whiteboard. Um, Kids go back, they do some work, maybe it's alone, maybe it's together, the teacher walks around and coaches, and that's kind of how things
Mhm.
unfold. But by creating different situations where maybe you start the class with a more open-ended task where they're working together and having to do that struggle and get their brains
Mhm.
warmed up, then you come together and you kind of teach through those, or you introduce a new thing, a new strategy, or a way to solve the problem. But then the idea for me, after I've taught my mini lesson, rather than sending all my students back, is I have an open invitation. Would anybody like to stay up here and work with me? That whole, it's okay to stay up for extra coaching,
Mhm.
or I'll do a sign up on the board. Does anybody want to do a review mini lesson on 2-digit multiplication? I'm doing it at 1 o'clock today, sign up. And that culture for, oh yeah, you know what, I probably could use a little help with that, and to be able to
Yeah.
own that. Or, boy, I really need help finding a good book because I keep picking books that are too hard for me. And that
Mhm.
that culture where it is okay to not be perfect all the time.
Yeah. Oh, no, I think that's great. I love that. Like that's really powerful. Okay, so I want to link to Joel Bowler's information, so I'll get that website from you, and I definitely
Hmm.
want to link to your store and your blog, because I know that will be really helpful. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to talk about, or you would like to offer,
Sure.
or you
You know,
wish I had asked you?
I think for me, teaching right now can be really overwhelming. We're asked to document things and to assess, and we've got children coming to us with all sorts of needs and concerns, and now they want us to teach virtually, but maybe not, and we don't know for the fall, and there's a lot of uncertainty. But
Yes.
there are some things that remain unchanged, and there are best practices in teaching. We know to be true. In my session at the conference, I kind of highlight some of the things that the research has shown to be, that we need to be doing less of and doing more of. And if we can educate ourselves about what's effective
Mm.
and what works, it's this kind of spiral effect. Students become more engaged. When students are more engaged, we have less behavior issues, and we have less
Yes.
behavior issues, we can teach more. We are
Mhm.
more excited, we're more engaged. So when we have all these other things surrounding us, if we can remember that planning really good, engaging instruction is kind of the foundation, and we can't
Yes,
lose that. So that's
absolutely.
really kind of what the intent of my blog is to keep pushing ideas for teachers that are interesting and exciting and very, very practical. And you don't have to read a 200-page book to figure it out. It's just a
Mhm.
try this, right?
Yes, yes.
So, 500, 600 blog posts later, and eight
Oh
years
my.
later, it's been kind of my dumping ground for those ideas. So if people are ever just kind of looking for something to, help them kind of break away from I have another IEP meeting, or we have another
Yes.
staff meeting, or we have to fill out our assessment forms, go, do some reading on some tangible things to remember why you joined this club of teachers in the first place.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that's a great idea, because I think we need that constant motivation when we feel like we're pushed down a lot. So I
Exactly.
definitely, I think it's important. I think it's really important. So those are the kinds of things, those are the kind of resources that we need to be looking for, or, blog posts that inspire us and motivate us and give us something practical to try. And I think we need to jump in and try it, and not always be, oh no, I'm afraid to do it this way. I've always done it like this. Like actually saying, you know what, I'm going to give it a try. Because you're right. When students are engaged, it changes the behavior. It changes the whole culture of your classroom. It makes a huge difference. And as I was telling you off air, being the student support specialist this past year, I saw a lot of behavior issues. And a lot of times I'd have to go in the classroom with the students sometimes to help them acclimate to the classroom. And it was like, if we don't have them like going and excited, then it's really difficult for some of those people that have a hard time sitting still.
Absolutely.
So,
and you know what, if we're wanting our students to have a growth mindset and to try new things and to be okay making mistakes, guess what? We need to model that for them too, don't we?
yes, absolutely. We absolutely do. Well, I really appreciate this, Meg. I learned a lot. You had some really great suggestions, and I appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me.
And I think that your session is going to be are you doing the session on problem solving? I mean,
I
that's your
am.
session.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Absolutely.
So if you missed Meg's session at Whole Teacher Eclecticon and it's not still available, and you never know, I'll link to it just in case, then at least you got some information today on the podcast, and you can really start to think about how we can, get our kids to really do a better job of problem solving. So I have to tell you, I'm getting ready to go back to school actually, when this comes out, I will be at school already. I will have already gone back to school because I start on August 3rd, which is a day after my son turns 16. So it's just, that's a lot of emotions going on with that happening, with him turning 16 and then going back and having to wear face masks and shields. And I bought a hat that has like a shield in the front of it because I thought, I needed some different options because I think that the mask behind my ears is going to bother me, like sensory wise. And so I'm like, okay, I'll try out this hat with this face shield. And well, first of all, I look ridiculous. And secondly, like you can't hear me. I'm going to have to yell or buy one of those portable like microphones because I sound like I'm in a bubble. So I don't know. I don't know how this is going to work. If you are in this boat, like I'm just praying for all the teachers and students that are going to be the guinea pigs, it feels like. Anyway, this one tired teacher, I've been rejuvenated by all these really wonderful guests, and I'm really thankful that I got to be a part of something so special. And but I'm feeling kind of tired. So this one tired teacher is ready for a nap. Until next time, sweet dreams and sleep tight.